like I said, I had an idea. The idea was all about the uh, suspended animation and what happens, when you're in that state for so long, and how do you come back? Kind of like, you have a really clear dream. Sometimes you wake up and you're a little fuzzy, like, okay, where am I here? Um, it even happens, interestingly enough, when I travel. So sometimes I'll wake up in a hotel room and not realize I'm not home. There's that confusion, and I wanted to explore that. I think that's where part of this came from, is just that exploration of, gosh, suspended animation's a long time.
Yep.
What's going to happen to your brain? How are you going to interact? All that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you throw in all the other future stuff. So right now, how many times do we have to be online and see the dating sites, and how they're trying to match you and all this kind of stuff? So I thought, if we're really trying to repopulate the universe because the earth is dying, we need not just couples that are going to get along and procreate, but we need talents and technology and people who can do certain things. And so how do I mix and match those? And then, of course, fix the ship, do the repairs.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
let me tell you.
Perfect.
What I was kind of expecting, and what did or didn't happen. First of all, I thought the time frame was really interesting, because it occurs to me that this is a voyage that could occur in the not too far off future.
Yes.
So, for example, maybe 100 years from now, maybe 200 years from now, but mankind has some experience in space travel, but they still have to deal with bolts that are loosening. They have to deal with cable assemblies that are coming loose. They have to deal with, a meteor hitting something or going through some space junk and it causing damage to the spaceship. So, they're working with box wrenches and screwdrivers and drills. So it isn't like they're snapping their fingers and then everything is done for them, in this universe where maybe droids or robots were doing everything. It's not like that.
No.
So you got this crew, and their mission is, well, first of all, we need to say that this voyage is going to take over 4,000 years. All right. So this is not a trivial undertaking. And everybody understands that the spaceship is not going near the speed of light. I mean, it's going at a reasonable speed. So it's going to take a long time to get to Earth 7. And in the meantime, this crew is going to be awakened when something happens to the ship and they have to go fix it. And then they go to sleep again, and then something else happens and they fix it. And for a while I thought, well, that's what the whole book was going to be. All right. And I thought that was interesting, but they get into various adventures, but it turns out to be a lot more than that. And you've alluded to that, because it's really a study of suspended animation. Okay. They have to go to sleep. Okay. And it turns out, just as you said, when they go to sleep, it's kind of like they dream and they have this other life, and they may be in this other life for dozens or hundreds of years. So, and things happen to them in this other life. And when they wake up, it's just like when you wake up from a night's sleep. If you've had a really good dream, maybe you wake up in a good mood. And if you've had a really a bad dream, a nightmare or something like that, you wake up and you're pretty crabby, you know? So,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
and I thought it was really cool because, at the beginning, um, I don't think we're gonna give away too many spoilers here, but
Yeah.
the first time they wake up is after about 50 years, and there's things that are going wrong, and then they realize that this ship is kind of a jalopy. This is they, I get the feeling that they're not really sure if this thing is going to last 4,000 years. But they do their best, and they wake up, and it takes a little bit of time for them to wake up, but they wake up and they fix whatever needs to be fixed. Then they go back to sleep, and they wake up again, and then they're starting to understand that their dreams really affect how they wake up.
Yeah.
And what I thought was really cool is that suspended animation is not something that you can really experiment with on Earth. You can't put somebody under suspended animation and then have them wake up 4,000 years later as an experiment.
No, that's right.
So you put somebody under suspended animation, and things go well, and it looks like that they're healthy when they're sleeping, and that things are doing okay, but you don't know what's going to happen when they wake up like 100 years from now. So that's why I'm saying that the time frame is important in this book, because it is not so far in the future that we have all these answers.
Right.
It's they're experimenting with this, and so they're discovering what the effect is of waking up after 50 years, and maybe waking up after a longer period of time of sleeping, and it's not the same. All right. And that's what's really interesting. I thought that was really fascinating. And then you contemplate, first of all, we need to say that there are 100,000 people on this spaceship. All right. So you're thinking, well, now a lot of these people are going to be sleeping for 4,000 years. And oh my God, what's going to happen to them after? This is what I'm thinking as I'm reading. All right. So I'm not going to reveal anything.
Right.
But you're thinking, well, what's going to happen after 4? And even then, how the hell do you wake up 100,000 people? One thing that I think is really cool in the book, I'm really talking way too much here, but whatever.
Okay.
And is that, they deal with all of the technical problems that they've got. And yeah, they have to overcome them. But it turns out, as it turns out in most books about apocalyptic conditions, which is kind of what this is. I mean, the Earth is going to shit, and so they have to escape, and so they're, it's like an apocalypse. It's a small community trying to make it. But what all of these stories about the apocalypse have in common is that a small group of people survives this apocalyptic event, and then the biggest problems they have are dealing with other humans.
Yeah, that's right.
So you never get away from the human condition.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting about this book, is because that comes through very clearly. You can solve all of these technical problems or not,
Mhm.
but the human problems are the ones that are among the most challenging.
Yeah.
So
Good.
anyway,
I'm glad. I'm glad you got you got that much out of it. I was hoping that when I reread it, of course, and when I was done with it, that the whole idea was close enough at that first section to get people to wonder what's going to happen the longer they're in suspended animation, because that really carries you through that book. Like, okay, what's going on? What's going to happen next? And that's, of course, what you want to do when you write anyway.
yeah, I think the important thing is that pretty soon you realize that this book is about suspended animation.
Yeah.
Okay, now there are things that happen along the way, But the real mystery is this idea of suspended animation. And I haven't seen any other books that really do that. For most sci-fi books that involve space travel, you assume that, it takes a hell of a long time to get from here to there. And so therefore people, go into suspended animation, and then they wake up and then they do their thing, but nobody really goes into, well, what is this suspended animation and what does it really do to people?
Yeah.
And I think it's, it's a relevant topic. We're going to Mars next, and you don't have to go into suspended animation to do that, but to go just about anywhere else, you got to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're never going to figure it out. It's always going to be an experiment, like you said, because you can't put somebody to sleep now and wait 200 years and go, well, let's wake them up now because you're 200 years old.
Yeah.
So,
let's see what happened to him,
yeah.
after 200 years.
Yeah. And nobody would know because they didn't know that person at the time. It would, yeah. It's an interesting thought to go through. Yeah, it was a fun book to write. So
the other thing I wanted to just mention or ask is that, boy, this book, okay, so it's the flight to Earth 7. All right. Yeah. So we're experiencing all this stuff now. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that, the end is just total apocalyptic and everyone dies, and that's the end of it. Okay. So I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that doesn't happen. I mean, right. So then the question is, wow, what's the next book? All right. Because there are some things that happen at the end of this book that leave you wondering, wanting more.
Yeah.
So I hope you've got that in mind.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe. All right. Maybe we could talk about that. It'd be fun to have a few teasers at the end of this book.
A few teasers.